Parental burnout was a buzzword during the pandemic, but years later, many families say they are still feeling the pressures.
I had felt for a while, just this feeling of like, I don't feel like I'm depressed. I don't feel like I'm anxious. Like, what is this feeling? And I heard the term parental burnout and I was like, that's it. Like, that's what I'm feeling.
Today on Mom Squad, we take a deep dive into what this study found with the woman behind the research.
We put these very high expectations on ourselves for these things, and then this again goes right over into the child. And so the child starts to feel these expectations.
You are not alone in the stress and what can be done to make your life happier for you and your kids. That's today on Mom Squad. Hi everyone, thanks for joining me here on Mom Squad. I'm Maureen Kyle. Are you feeling burned out? More than half of parents in a recent study say they are. But can any of us really explain why? This study took a look at what is stressing us out the most and what we can do to fix it. Of course, this is one of those topics my friends and I are always talking about all the time. So I needed to bring in my friend and executive producer, Jenny Jordan, to talk about this study, the findings, which we will go into in a minute. But you are actually the one who sent this to me going, we need to talk about this.
We need to talk about it because one of my friends was just saying about it and how she's like, I can't mom anymore. I'm done momming. That feeling of just being like, even burned out and overwhelmed by not just momming, but also like, take care of yourself, do this and that, just over, and that's really where the burnout comes in, I think.
Yeah, I just saw somebody post on Instagram, like, who is able to sleep for 8 hours, get an hour workout in, work for your 8 hours, like all of the things that we're expected to do. It's just, I think that is the expectation, is just making us feel like, how are we gonna do it all? No matter what level of, how many kids you have or what your job is. It's just balancing all of this is so difficult.
Right, difficult, definitely. Not easy.
And they tie, spoiler alert, they tie it back to COVID times. Like the COVID kind of started the pandemic, everybody working from home, everybody trying to figure it out. And this feeling never went away, which I thought was very interesting.
I thought that too. And it's funny because I always say, did COVID teach us nothing? That maybe we needed to slow down, maybe not be out of our house so much, you know? And yet it was like the minute all the restrictions were lifted, it's like, great, gotta sign my kids up, 10 camps, here we go, we're gonna run, it's like, what?
I know. Well, the activities really play into it. We're gonna talk about it. I want you to take a listen. We talked to the nurse who is the lead on this Ohio State University study, Kate Golick, about why they did this study in the first place and exactly what they found. Kate, thank you so much for talking with us. When we saw this study, everybody in the newsroom felt like this is our lives, the burnout of parents. Can you explain to me, before we get into the key findings, why was this important for you and your group to study?
So that's a really great question. And I think really it dates back to the pandemic. And, one day I have 4 kids, and at the time of the pandemic, they were, 8 months, 3, 5, and 7. And I just remember being in the kitchen one day with my husband, and he looked at me and he's like, can you believe that we do this every day? And I was just like, no, I can't believe this, like that this is our daily life. And I had felt for a while, just this feeling of like, I don't feel like I'm depressed. I don't feel like I'm anxious. Like, what is this feeling? And I heard the term parental burnout and I was like, that's it. Like, that's what I'm feeling. And so I became very interested in this because I thought, if I'm feeling this way, I'm pretty sure that everybody else is feeling this way too. And so that's kind of how this started and how I got very interested in this topic.
Yeah, I think anybody who had kids during that time, had kids learning from home while we were all trying to work from home, felt that like you would almost think it would be easier of like, okay, kids are taking Zoom classes and doing homework while we're on Zoom doing our work. But I don't know, have you found out, like, what was it about everybody being Was it out of routine that kind of set it off, or was it the burden that parents felt to handle learning and also working or whatever it was they were doing from home?
I think it was probably a mixture of both. I think during that immediate time when we were in that forced shutdown, and then the time period after, where parents just felt a loss of control. Like all of a sudden, we didn't know what our day-to-day was going to look like. And that feeling is so hard, right? We already don't feel this sense of control when we have kids because, they have their own minds. They have their own ideas about how they want to do things. And so we already feel that. And then to put the pandemic on top of that, where we truly did lose, so much control over our day-to-day, it was just too much for parents. Yeah. And I think now what we're seeing and why we wanted to do this residual study is because we wanted to see what does it look like for parents now? Have parents recovered? Are parents doing better than they did before? So we wanted to kind of look at those things. And we got very interested too in, what has happened over time with the parent-child relationship? How has that been affected, and what does that look like for parental burnout?
I'm so interested in hearing what you found, because it's hard to, when you're in it, to take a look at like, gosh, how is my relationship with my child? How am I 4 years post-pandemic, and how has life changed? We know life's changed in a million ways, but what do you think? Go ahead and go into the study. What did you find 4 years out of the pandemic? How is life and parenthood now?
Yeah, so we're still seeing very high rates of parental burnout. So about 57% of parents are reporting that they are still feeling burned out. This is about 10 points lower than what we saw during the pandemic. But the fact of the matter is this is still over half of our population, which is huge when we look at this. So parents are really still struggling. And, there is definitely, we're seeing, this intersect between parent mental health, child mental health, and parent burnout. So there is definitely a lot of overlap there between parents, child, and burnout.
I want to talk to you about what you found with the expectations, that parents are putting these expectations on themselves. So what were in the study the parents saying about trying to be the perfect parent?
Yeah, I think all parents can relate to this, that it's almost like we get into this competition with other parents about, you start feeling this desire, or not even this desire, this pressure to have it all together. And you want your child to be doing well in school. You want them to be excelling in sports. You want them to be, very social and have those social friendships. And so we put these very high expectations on ourselves for these things. And then this, again, goes right over into the child. And so the child starts to feel these expectations. And so our study really did strongly associate these internal and external expectations with parent burnout. So we know that these two are very associated.
While we're still on the topic, because there's plenty of other findings I want to get to, but managing those expectations, now that you've looked at what parents said and how many parents are feeling this, what should parents be doing, and what kind of mind frame should they be in when managing those expectations or setting those expectations for ourselves and for our kids?
I think this is also a very great question. I think that social media has really influenced the way that our generation of parents have been able to parent, I guess I should say, right? Because we can see what others are doing and we compare ourselves often that way. Looking through Instagram or Facebook or whatever it is and saying, oh my gosh, everybody looks like they're doing so well. Like, why is this so hard for me? Or, why doesn't my family life look like this? Like, I feel like I'm more in the midst of chaos. And so I think shutting off that social media and having the understanding that people will not post the things that don't put them in a favorable light, right? And we all have those things. That's what family life is about. It's about that chaos. It's about that, having these little people that have these very big, strong emotions. So I think that's one thing that parents can really do. I think, looking at our priorities as parents and saying, what is important to us? And does that align with what we're doing?
Right.
Right. So, I think we all want our kids to, for example, do well in sports, but if every time they're going to go to a sports practice and they're complaining and saying they don't want to go and they want to stay outside and play, does that align with your priority as a parent? Right. Like, I don't think my 7-year-old needs to be going to practice for soccer 3 times a week. Like the way he learns and what's important to him right now is playing, so that will look a little bit different for every family. But I also think that's a huge thing that parents can do is say, is this in alignment with my priority for myself, my family, and my child? Or is this a social expectation that I'm giving into?
I love that you and your team covered the activity level and this pressure for sports. I think that we've done episodes here on Mom Squad about the sports expectations and the club sports pressure and everything like that. And when I took a look at what you found about how many activities kids are involved in and how it relates to their mental health, I think that was the most surprising aspect of this study. Tell us about what you found with the number of activities, because here's where the chaos is in my house. I mean, I even yesterday forgot that my middle child was supposed to be at an activity because we were running around to so many activities. But talk to me about the number of activities, the stress it puts on families, and then the effect of mental health.
Yes, absolutely. So we see this as, like a continuum. So the higher the number of these structured extracurricular activities that a child is engaged in, the more likely they are to exhibit these negative behaviors. So these negative behaviors are things like, trouble concentrating, being easily distracted, feeling down on themselves, things like they can fight or tease other children, so we do know that this is impacting their mental health and it's not healthy for them. And there is a ton of research out there showing the beneficial and positive effects of things like extracurricular activities. So we're not saying that at all. It's just the number of extracurricular activities that they're doing. It's being piled on and piled on. And that's not good for their mental health. And I will say for parents, that's not good for parents' mental health either, right? Because we're the ones often doing the carpooling and doing and orchestrating the events, right?
Right.
So twofold on that. Both the parents and the child are affected by that.
It's so funny because that's when I feel like I'm losing control the most is I'm supposed to be picking up and dropping, picking up one kid at 6 o'clock, but also dropping the other one off at 6 o'clock and coordinating the carpools, but then I don't hear back. That's where, when I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm losing it. How am I going to pull all of this off? It's usually all of the activities. So how do you cut down on the activities when your kids ask to do everything? When we come back, Kate, who is a mother of 4, has her recommendations on how to pick and choose. And we always hear, put your phones away, but Kate goes into what her research found about how unplugging can really help your family. Welcome back. We've been talking with Kate Gawlik, one of the lead researchers behind an Ohio State University study on parental burnout. The study found the more activities your child is in, the higher the risk for anxiety and depression in both you and your children. So how do you handle that? We asked Kate about what the research says. Kate, you said you have 4 kids, correct? I have to ask you, as a mom now and somebody who has done this study, and I'm sure you're in the same boat that a lot of us are in, there's always at least one child in the family or 2 that says, well, I want to do this activity, that activity, this activity, that activity. When the kids are saying, especially at certain ages when they're still discovering what they like, and they're listing off, well, I want to do this, this, and this, and this. How how do we handle that? I mean, have you thought about that differently now that you've studied this? When a kid comes to you and says, well, I want to do baseball, track, swimming, and some other, music. How do we handle that?
Yes, this absolutely. And I do have 2 of those children right now as well. And so my mentality before was like, I want you to try and experience everything. And I don't not want you to do that, right? But I want you to do that in more of a realistic way. And so now what my husband and I have done is we say you can participate in 2 extracurricular activities per season. And so we do cut it off, and preferably, there's like a primary and then a secondary. Mm-hmm. So we focus then on the primary, and then if we need to, skip things for the secondary, that tends to be, the one that we will default to for those things. But it is challenging, especially when you want them to do all those things, and there's benefits for each of those things. But I think as parents, we're in the role when we know, and the research is showing us that this is not beneficial for them.
Yeah. What are the effects? Because I feel like the study wrapped up with the effects that, like the mental health effects, how it comes out negatively from us, how when we as parents are not mentally healthy, how it comes out and how it affects our kids. Can you talk to me about what you found with that?
Yeah, and so we know that parents, and this has been supported by other research as well, that when you look at, for example, the stress level of a parent, and then you look at the stress level of the child, they're actually very similar, right? So even if we think as parents we're doing a great job controlling maybe our stress or managing that, it's oftentimes coming out then in different ways. So whether that's our inattention to them or our inability to focus, like we might be sitting there and pretending to listen, but if our brain's going a million different places and we're wondering about, did I respond to that email? Did I, sign you up for this? They are picking up on those things. They are able to see through that. And so the parent and the child relationship is so very intertwined that often we see these high rates of, mental health illness in the parent. And oftentimes then we'll see those things in the child, whether it's, different behavioral things or, different attention behaviors, however that looks, we're often seeing those very associated. Mm.
And this study also goes into how to be a good active listener, to develop that relationship with our child and make sure we have a good relationship. Why active listening? What kind of difference does that make in relating with our children?
So to be an active listener, the biggest advice that I can give parents is put your phone down. Put your phone, not even just down, but far away. Mm-hmm. Because when you have that available, you're same with your watch too. If you have a watch, you're always connected. So that isn't allowing you to really focus on, what your child is saying. And again, they really pick up on those things. I recently was talking to somebody who was saying, I asked my child, can you tell me some things that I do well as a parent? And, and they said a couple things. And then they said, what could I improve on? What could I do better as a parent? And all 3 of their children separately said, put your phone down more. Wow. And so I think when we are active listening, we need to remember that our phone, even its presence sitting on a table, is there. And the kids need to realize that our priority is them and not our phone. Mm. So I think that's one of the biggest advice giving things that I can say about active listening. So far, we're not going to compare ourselves on social media and we're going to put our phone away. It is something we always talk about, is like, why do we keep going back to social media and we keep going back to looking at our phones? It's part of life, but it's finding that balance. Kate, I want to ask you too, because this study
You know, you would think that, okay, we're done with the pandemic, that's over, thank goodness, but the effects, it just feels like life has changed, parenthood has changed. Is this a dynamic, and is this something that your group will continue to study because life has changed so much thanks to those couple years of being in the pandemic?
Yes, absolutely. I think, you know, looking at this longitudinally, you know, over this time frame will be really important for us. And I will say that I was very surprised that the burnout rates were still so elevated. But then when you start talking to people, you're like, no, actually, like every parent I talk to is feeling like this. And so I think kind of what we're seeing now with this is when the pandemic happened, everything shut down. So all these things that we loved, like sports, we were unable to participate in them. And so now it's almost like parents and children are overcompensating for that. And that's where our feelings of burnout are now coming from, because we want to do everything.
Right.
And that's not supporting our mental health.
Yeah, it makes so much sense, and it is scary to see 57% of parents are feeling burnout, because I don't, you know, it would be interesting. I wish we had some numbers even pre-pandemic, because I remember running around with, you know, babies and toddlers before the pandemic thinking I'm burned out, but there is something that has shifted in whether it's the way we have our work lifestyle, our work-life balance. There is just such a difference. So I'm so glad that you're doing this study and taking a look at it, because the more informed we are about how we can approach parenting, putting the phones away, not comparing on social media, I feel like the healthier our families will be. Have you noticed a difference in your own family after you've done all of this research?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I just think bringing these types of things to light, you know, another thing that our study found was the importance of parents actively playing with their children. And those benefits are not only, you know, good for the child, but they're actually good for the parent as well. You know, so I think trying to keep these findings in light. So, you know, playing more with my children, putting my phone down more, you know, decreasing some of these extracurricular activities, I do think has made a big difference. I mean, those were some of the good things about the pandemic too, is that it forced us to slow down. Now we're just in overdrive. So we have to come back and find that happy medium again.
Yeah, the pendulum swing that we need to all experience. Kate, thank you so much. This was so insightful. I really appreciate your time, and thank you to you and your team for doing this study and really taking a look at it.
Yes, and thank you so much for having us.
It was wonderful. We'll check back in with you as you continue to research this. When we come back, some real talk between moms. Producer Jenny and I talk about whether parents can really pull off pulling back on activities and what we've found with our families. So, after listening to what they found in that study, I think one of the biggest things that every parent can identify with is the number of activities and how that stresses us out. I'm bringing Jenny back in because we have to talk about the activities. How do we climb that mountain of, I feel like I try to limit the activities and somehow we're still doing all of these things all the time.
It's that just one more.
Yes.
Just one more.
We can fit this in.
You know, and it's because your kids get excited about something, or maybe this is what I always love, right? You go to their first soccer game and you're like, wait, is my kid good at soccer? Maybe my kid's good. Okay, let's get them in all the camps because it's so competitive. And then you're like, by game 2, they're picking flowers on the sidelines. They're like, oh, just a blurp in time, you know?
Yes.
And it's like, you know, that's where I fall. That's where I'm guilty. It's just, even this summer, I was like, I so want to have that sandlot summer where it's just sleep in and go outside and do this. But then I'm also like, well, we can't just sleep in and not do anything. They're going to have summer slide and they need to get off their iPads and they need to. So, okay, swim team's really good for that. And you know what? My daughter wants to try volleyball, so there's a good camp. And guess what? After camp, there's tutoring. And guess what? Now the club is doing tennis. So all her friends are there and they want her to join. She says yes. And now we're running to 900 places and we're in 2nd grade, 3rd grade.
And I think that's a tough age. And Kate and I briefly touched on it because, as you heard us talk about, she has 4 kids, and she says she limits them to 2 activities, a main activity, a sub-activity. That's still a lot of activities for 4 kids. And I think we are in that phase, at least with my kids' ages, of I don't know what they want to do yet. They don't know what they want to do yet. Right. So even yesterday, before we started recording this, my middle, she wants to do, because she can sign up for cross country. They have like little kids cross country at our school. She can sign up for cross country, but last year she loved soccer, so we signed up for all these soccer clinics. Now she's like, I don't know, but I want to do dance, and I want to try volleyball, and I want to, and so that's just one kid of trying to figure out what is it that they love doing, because they don't know yet.
And you want to expose them to everything, because you want to find out what they love. But then I also think, and this is a topic for another day, is we don't have seasons anymore. Growing up, it used to be, okay, fall is right. Football season, soccer season, winter's basketball season, maybe volleyball, summer's baseball, spring is, this. And now it's like, it's all year round. So you feel like if you want them to try other things, but continue to be good at what they like, you're adding on instead of doing one thing at a time,
And when we were kids, it was rec. Everybody did rec. Now everybody does these clubs or these skill camps and all of that.
Yes.
All of that. So then there's not really a season, and to pare everything down is difficult. But I would say it's eye-opening to me that the stress affects our kids, that they have more depression and anxiety. We think we're giving them happiness and all these experiences, but then to hear that they are experiencing depression and anxiety because of all this happiness we're giving them, that makes me really think twice about what I'm signing them up for.
And that's such an eye-opener, because I feel like the times that I think, okay, no, I can't do all of this. We got to scale back. Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, first I'm always like, well, other moms can figure it out, and they have more kids than me.
Yeah.
Or I think like, well, I got to give them everything, right? You want to give your kids everything, but one thing that you have to give them is you.
Yeah.
And your time. Yeah. And your patience and all of that, and that's what's so hard. It's like, that's what I liked about this study was like, okay, let's talk about this. It's not, I feel like there was so much emphasis on, are you getting enough sleep? It's like when you have a newborn, right?
Yeah.
They're not sleeping, so there's always sort of like, how are you doing? Are you getting enough sleep and everything? And then it's like, I still haven't gotten sleep. I still haven't made that sleep, because after they go to bed, we're washing uniforms and we're making sure they have their school project stuff out and, and doing all those other things that I'm like, we could be doing if we weren't running around all day and eating. Then on top of the activities, it's like you're eating dinner at 4 p.m. or 9 p.m.
Yes.
And it's like, is this really the best thing for them?
Right. The expectations of healthier dinners, and then you have to have that homework done, and then you have to, all of it's stressful. But I guess the takeaway in all of this is that we can't overload our schedule. And I guess that's sort of a no-brainer that we've been overloading our schedule, so of course that's burning us out and that's stressing us out. But if you're going to expect to work and get your sleep and get your exercise and eat your fruits and vegetables, your kids can't be doing 5 different activities.
Right.
Or be on several different teams.
And I think it's just explain to them, right? That's what we want better for them.
Yeah.
So let's talk to them. How do we prioritize this? Make it a group thing. Like, hey, this is starting to be too much. But remember, I always tell my kids, what actually comes first is school. Like,
yes.
And
a lot of people forget about that, though.
But it really does, because of all of these things and all the these expectations that we set up. It's like, when are you doing homework? When are you doing?
Yeah.
And that's where the burnout, because it starts to be like, okay, well, I got to get homework in at this time. And then it's yelling because we only have a half hour to do it.
Right.
Instead of being like, okay, this is not the right time. We all need a snack. We're hangry.
Yeah.
Let's come back to it. It's like there's no wiggle room. So that's what I liked, though, about the study was just, I think, talking about it and then trying to find a solution for what fits your family and your kids is going to be different,
I think that there are going to be a lot of moms out there who are watching, grandparents maybe, that have a lot of advice on maybe what they've learned. Like if you're a little bit further down the road and your kids are out of the house and you remember these days and you have advice for all the other moms, that's why we have the Mom Squad with Maureen Kyle Facebook page and Instagram at Mom Squad show, where you can interact with us. We want to know what you think about all of this, because this was really eye-opening. Has it been just since COVID? Is it something that we all need to combat? How did you figure it out? How are you making it work for your family? So Jenny and I are always plugged in on those social media pages. We want to hear from you, and we want to know how you handled it, right?
Great, please let us know. We need it. We need the advice.
Yes,
I need it.
Exactly. And we'll just have to cover more of this type of topic as we go through, especially going into fall, covering those fall sports. But thank you, Jenny, for weighing in.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks to all of you for tuning into Mom Squad. We'll see you back here next time.